Hello, another video on what to expect from a certain deck because I wanted to get these done before regionals at the weekend. And this one's on Steelsong. Most likely you're going to play one or two, maybe three, maybe more. You could probably even end up having 9 rounds of Steelsong. It's going to be quite a popular deck, I think. And yeah, just going to cover over it. This is just a list that I've grabbed from Index because I went around and I was just trying to look. I will mention as well, I didn't realize how pricey Steel Song can be. It can be up to more than $500, I guess, because it does play a lot of legendaries, especially if you're using Naveen. And then it's a lot of set one staple cards, which like Aerial and Whole New World like that. So if you were to just buy it straight off the bat, it's actually quite fairly pricey. It's not Diablo, Bucky levels of prices on the $700 mark, but I think $500 plus for a deck is quite a bit of a price. But I think there's a lot of Steel Song players have always been around, so the deck's just built. A lot of these cards, as I say, they're staples, so most people have play sets of these. So yeah, I don't think the price is much to talk about, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Yeah, when sort of Set 5 started, the first version we saw was utilizing Daisy, and the idea is that you can use Daisy and Pete. So you can get to a point where you can shift or get Ariel to sing Whole New World, and then you have X amount of ink to play with. You can play a bunch of Daisies, play Pete, lock the lore in, and then keep going from there. Wheel and play another Daisy. Play more of these characters like Piglet and stuff as well. Lock more lore in with the Pete because it'd be like you can't touch my board with any of your actions. The only real answer here is Sisu, who's the big Sisu, and that's probably why Red Blue is their worst matchup. And Naveen as well, you can just cheat out a free Whole New World to wheel, but of course if you're going to spend the 4 ink, it's unlikely you're going to have another because you'll be at 7 ink, and then that's quite late into the game. But yeah, overall it's just really powerful. I find the deck to be very, very high roll though. Sometimes you beat them just because they don't have answers. No, sorry, they don't have answers. They just brick. The mulligan's gone bad for them. They've got a bunch of uninkables in hand. They're having to ink cards they want to keep. And yeah, it just doesn't work for them. But overall, it's very good deck. It's very powerful. I'm struggling to not use the word consistent because, as I say, you sometimes just get games from them because they just doesn't work out for them. And they just don't get the right cards they want in the right order. Maybe they don't even find the Whole New World, even with the aerial dig. And they bottom deck some cards that they might have wanted to keep. But overall, yeah, it's still very powerful. I'm not going to down talk it by just calling it a high roll deck. It's really good. It's Steel Song. It's very controlling with all of its spells that it can do for free because it can sing them. Um, and then all the characters are very lore aggressive characters, so it can just go over you sometimes. And then you've also got the big Cinderella as well, that can be another thing that can control the board. And Pete, as I keep mentioning, can stop all the actions. So yeah, this is just a list I've grabbed from one of the Lorcana quests. I did one of these. These are really cool. Always get really good players in. They have good pricing. So this is fairly what you'd see as a standard Steel Song lists that it would be in a competitive environment. As you can see, there's only the Robin Hood shift line because I think maybe it might be for a space reason, or you just don't want 2 shift lines because it's very hard to messes up your mulligan a little bit because you're trying to compete for 2 shift lines there. It is only running the Robin Hood and not the what's it called? Not the Queen shift line, which I think people opt between. And in my personal opinion, I think Robin Hood is weaker into red decks because Medusa is just such an insane removal for that card. And versus steel decks, I think Robin Hood is better. Whereas vice versa, I think the Queen is better into red decks because you get an early wheel. Can't be Medusa'd. The damage buff thing is really good for hitting into things. You can take out a Queen's Castle by giving something a buff to whatever that's got 3 attack. So yeah, overall I think that's a decision for either of you. But also Robin Hood just as a body, as a 3/6, what he does, he can draw you cards. If they don't have a Medusa, he still puts in a lot of work. So it's just seeing Robin Hood coming out on top as the card choice in most of these lists. And there's a few other things to notice. The bare necessities quantity, it goes up and down. I've seen it range from 2 to 3. It's fairly never see it 4x'd out. Just because it's very good, it's very useful, but you can't just win by keep bare necessitating people. And you need the space in the deck for other things that keep it rolling. So I think from 2 to 3 is what I'd expect to see. There's one World's Greatest Criminal Mind in here. I've seen people mainly run none these days, just because if you run one, it's like, am I going to find it? Am I going to find it at the right times? And then if you run more, it's like, well, now I'm really going in for having to deal with Tamatoas and bigger characters that are 5+, like a Steel Simba, a 5/7 Simba. It'd be really, really good if you get it at the exact time you need it, but if you don't, it's just going to be a messy card that you don't really need. And World's Greatest Criminal Mind does pair all right with the Queen if you're using the Queen because you can damage buff things and then use World's Greatest Criminal Mind to remove them. So I think that's a card if you're playing a deck that fears World's Greatest Criminal. I've said that name like 3 times now. If you're playing a deck that fears that, maybe you want to put Tamatars out. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think it's not going to come up as much. I think you're probably going to be fine to put your bigger characters out there. If they play 1 or 2 copies, they will be thinking about that card, of course. But I think in a regional setting, with all these sort of blind lists and you don't know what you're playing against entirely, I think you're safe to put out your big characters, and I'm not going to use the word safe, but I think it's the best play is to just to play them out and see what happens if you can afford it and if it's the right thing to do on that turn. I've also noticed though this list, Vanessa is down to 1. Vanessa, the Ursula, the human Ursula, whatever people call it these days. Um, it's yeah, that sort of fluctuates around. For a while, it would be very good to play Daisy on turn 1, Ursula on turn 2, and then just protect the Daisy. But that sort of doesn't seem to be as much of a thing people are doing as much these days. I don't see it played as much. Um, but yeah, I think that's a card that can go up and down in quantities, and it's very good for just cheating out early Zeus's, getting insane early board control, and basically having you not have anything on board unless you got ward characters like a Cogsworth or something like that, or a Muses. So yeah, that's a few other things to notice. And when Pete was added to the deck, I saw people playing lower accounts of him. I never saw lower than 3, but it looks like now people realise that Pete is just insane for their deck, especially in Steelsong where it's wheel flood. So a lot have just gone back to 4x, and I think that's completely the right play. The Veen count as well. I think in this version, when you play the Daisy, because the Daisy is an inkable, you play a lower count of Naveen. Great card, really good, but there's a lot of uninkables to play with there, and you just want to keep the consistency of the deck as much as possible. So in the Daisy versions, you're less likely to see Naveens. I'm not saying you won't see any. I mean, there's 2 in this list, but yeah, it doesn't focus on using Naveen as much as the Lantern build does, which is kind of interesting because the Lantern also uses an uninkable card like the Lantern. But I'll get onto that build. It's the other one I want to mention as well. And the Cinderella shift line is always going to be there. I find as well, again, in the Daisy builds, you see less counts of it, but it's not like it's not played. You see probably about 2. So a Cinderella on 1, she's going to be able to sing a bunch of powerful songs, but also on top of that, she's going to have an incredible shift that can just cheat out on turn 5 a really early Cinderella. So yeah, I think and then just stop trading stuff. I think that card's just broken. Yeah, so overall, this is what I'd expect to see. I think the Piglet count changes as well. Piglet on the play is an insane card. If you're on the play and you play Piglet on 2, you go Cindy, Piglet. You're only 1 character away from getting that extra 2 lore, so you get 3 lore, and the 3 lore early on, especially if your turn 1 maybe was a Daisy, you're going to get 5 lore on that turn. That's just nuts. So yeah, I've seen it going up and down. I think that's sometimes due to the general faith that the player has in the card. On the draw, it's a little bit rougher. It's going to do some work, and then it's just going to die very easily, and it's not going to do anything else besides gain you lore. So yeah, that's I think this is what you'd find in the standard Steelsong list. Yeah, you 4x the Let's Storm, 4x the strength. I see Zeus as well going up to 4x sometimes, but I think it's sticking at 3 most of the time. That's still a scary number for a Zeus when majority of your deck can sing it. I'm not going to say majority actually, but most of your deck can sing it. So yeah, I think this is exactly what you'd see from a standard Steelsong list. So yeah, if you're going into an event and you're seeing an early Daisy, and you're not seeing a Lantern on 2 or whatever, you can probably expect it's going to be a list just like this. So yeah, going on to the other build, if I know how to click buttons properly. This is the Candio's list. In the bottom left corner, my face and camera is blocking the Naveen, but there's a 4x Naveen there as well, and that's all I'm blocking. Yeah, so this one utilizes the Lantern. Basically, I'm finding with Blue Steel against this a lot more of a trouble because, in a sense, it's sort of doing ramp in its own way with the Lantern. And they usually try to get the Lantern out as early as possible. They can do some crazy things like Cinderella on 1, Lantern on 2. Then by turn 3, they can shift Cinderella earlier. Or they can play Lantern on 2 and then get the Naveen out on 3 to wheel very early on and then have a readied singer on board. So I find this build just incredibly nuts when it pops off, and the majority of the time it does do that. I would assume as well that you would have played 4x lanterns, but looking at some of these lists, I've seen some of them use 3, probably just for an uninkable count. But I assume you still do heavy mulligan for it when you get it, because mulligan lantern on 2 just seems so brokered. And then you wheel in some more lanterns, and then you just have this. Like I say, you're having a version of ramp that's your own, and it's a little bit better than what you can. It's not a little bit better. It's its own version of ramp. It's not better than Quill. I'm not going to say that at all. But yeah, they're going to be able to just do things at a discount cost, and they're going to be able to sing songs at a discount cost because of all the singers and stuff like that. As I say, this one's got Vanessa Ursula. I think I'm playing Vanessa. Yes, they've got an Ursula that they can play early on, and just start protecting things or start singing. Um, like bare necessities and stuff like that. I think with you know, I still think it's pretty good. I don't really have much to say on that. I think Vanessa's a really strong card, and I would play a larger quantity than one in my list if I was playing Steelsong. But yeah, this utilizes on cheating out the characters at discount cost. There's loads of things you can do. Getting 2 Robin Hoods down really early on as well is awesome. Just yeah, just in general, it's pretty awesome. And the Veen, yeah, is to get the early wheel, and then you have a ready singer up. And even with this list, I don't think you'd ever see the Queen in this list. I think it is more about bigger bodies that just do more questing and more stuff like that. But as you see, there's no World's Greatest Criminal Mind in here. Whenever I play against it, I find it's a very solitaire-based deck. It's only very marginally bothering what you're doing on your side. I'm going to say solitaire based deck. Basically what I mean is it's just mainly focusing on what it wants to do, which is play stuff and then say, hey, react to it. Because I'm going to peat and do all these things. I'm just going to keep flooding board and then doing and then peating and making you have awkwardly trying to answer my deck. But on top of that, it is still Steelsong, so it has a lot of songs, so it will have to look at your board and go, okay, what do I want to kill here to make this even more awkward? So yeah, I think overall, which list you'd see just from talking to players quite a lot, you would see the Daisy version a bit more. I think people just it makes more sense to them. It's mainly is just play your characters and turn sideways. So overall, I think that one's probably going to get more play. The Lantern version, I think, is the better version. I think it just plays more value. It does a lot more things. But I've just from interacting with players, I find if they're like, oh, I'm going to go to regionals and I play quite a bit of Lorcana, I'm just finding that the Daisy version is just a bit more my style. Is what I keep hearing. Whereas the Lantern one, you have to think about your lines a bit more. Think the best shift lines, the best value from playing the Lanterns at certain points in the matchup, and when to flood and when to wheel. Whereas I find with this version, it is basically just put stuff on board, play Pete, turn sideways. So I just think people will probably opt for this version a bit more, and I don't blame them. I think it is still a good version as well. Daisy's still an insanely powerful card. But if you go against the Lantern version, just remember, yeah, they're going to be working for those early shift lines, early Cinderella, early Robin Hoods, early Prince Naveen's. I've even seen in this version, sorry, I just want to mention, people put the golden harps back in. That basically just gives them more daisies, I think. It's the point. I've seen many people put like 2 golden harps in here. I don't know how much you'd see that. And again, it's the same game plan as dealing with a daisy. They're just going to want to flood and play Pete and then just keep questing and turning sideways. But yeah, I think these are the 2 lists you're going to see pretty much most often. Off-brand choices. I'm going to say sometimes you might see the Queen shift line, but that's few and far between. I don't think you should worry about that too much. It's still just a shift line that they're going to try and wheel you with, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. And besides that, I haven't seen many other things. I haven't seen Pride Lands being played. I haven't seen flutes being played at all. And those versions I think are just weaker now when we've got these 2 very solid builds that have consistently at events sort of that you can check on Inkdex have just performed well. So yeah, I think this is sort of where we're at with Steelsong and what you'd really expect from seeing it at regionals.